Alright guys, I'm junior at UB, I'm Sean Kaczmarek, I'm running for Vice President on the Unity ticket. Just a little bit about where I am now and how I got there. I'm currently the SISH Coordinator, Special Interest Service and Hobby, so all the clubs that fall under that category, I kind of oversee their budgets, their events, if they need help with things. I kind of act as a liaison between them and the Student Association. About 60 clubs, permanent and temporary, are in the SISH Council. It's the largest council. How I got there, I actually, my freshman year, started getting involved in some SISH clubs. So the two main ones were Model United Nations and College Democrats. So I worked with them throughout the year, went to a lot of their meetings or events, and then at the end of the year, I decided to run for e-board. So Model UN, my sophomore year, I was a publicity director for, and College Democrats I was a vice president for. And in those positions, I kind of learned a little more about how clubs interact with SA, and where I thought there kind of was a lack in communication between clubs and SA. So that prompted me at the end of the year to run for SISH coordinator. So that's where I am now, and I've been in this position the entire year. I guess just outside of UB, I'm from West Seneca, New York, which is about 15 minutes south of here. Went to school around here. I've lived here my entire life, so I'm Buffalo native. And I know pretty much everyone on our ticket are Buffalo natives, and that kind of leads to a couple points on our platform, but I know Manahil already touched on that. But as for my specific parts on the platform, the vice president traditionally deals with a lot of club policy. So the one thing that has been lacking this year from SA is a club handbook. So there's a lot of issues that I guess come up when you're a coordinator, and there's nothing specific to tell your clubs because there's no set policy. So we're going off of what we know, what the last year's policy was, because that's technically what we have to do, even though it really should be updated. So I know one of the main things myself and my other two e-board members want to do is come up with this policy first thing August 1st when the new budgets come out, so clubs right away, they know what they're expected to do the semester, they know how rollover is going to work for the coming year, they know exactly what's going on, because we haven't had that this year, and I think it's something that needs to be done, because otherwise we might have 6 coordinators saying 6 different things. In addition to that, at the beginning of the year, there are club orientations every year, and clubs kind of dread going through them. Coordinators think they're kind of boring because they're not specific to our council, and a lot of times our clubs don't get much out of them, so we have to re-explain a lot of things anyway. So what we want to do is host shorter and club/council specific orientations. So for instance, Joe Pace, the treasurer on our ticket, he is the engineering coordinator, so his clubs would hear more specific things about material donations and how kind of those would work into their budget, whereas sports clubs might hear about traveling to competitions or how to work out coaching. There might be other clubs like International who do a lot of huge events, like Fiesta is a big thing they do as an entire council, and then smaller things like Barrio is done by FASA. So things like that, how to plan events, would be more towards International. So if we can kind of gear it specifically towards those clubs, I think it would be more efficient and more effective for those councils. Additionally, we want to have a grievance policy. A lot of times as coordinators, we have clubs come in and say, hey, I've talked to SA Production and they haven't done this, or hey, I've talked to marketing and media and they haven't done this. So we, at that point, really have nothing to do except kind of go to that person, go to the e-board and be like, what's going on? This club is complaining, we don't know what happened, we weren't involved in this. So what we want is, we want a form, we want a grievance policy. They can come in, fill out the form, explain which staff member it was, kind of explain the situation, and then meet with, whether it's myself or any of the other e-board members, and then we can kind of walk them through, all right, well, we'll take these actions, we'll talk to the staff member, we'll see if it was a miscommunication, we'll see if it was our fault, we'll see where, I guess, the fault lies, and then from there we can kind of take steps going forward to make sure something like that doesn't happen again, and that clubs can get a more positive experience next time.
Yeah,
More minute, okay. Moving outside of clubs, we do want to, again, advocate more towards the entire student body, so even things like basketball hoops and Ellicott, where people actually can get hurt working with campus facilities and living for that. In addition, there are things like Spirit Week, Homecoming, where they're more geared towards clubs, especially the larger clubs. There really isn't much for the average student, and while it's not fully worked out yet, because, I mean, we haven't really had much time to plan out details, we do plan on sitting down with any staff we have next year and students that we know outside of SA to kind of come up with ideas that can get more involvement in Spirit Week and Homecoming, and hopefully we can grow the event, and things like Carnival as well can grow because we have more student involved.
elaborate a little bit on the handbook situation? So right now there isn't a formal, like...
Okay, so what happens every year is typically the SAE board will come out with a new handbook. If one isn't come out with, we go by the last year's policy. So right now we're working on 2013-14 policy because it wasn't updated. And it's not a rule to update it. There's nothing that says we have to. It's just usually as things come up, as a new e-board comes in, they might want to tweak a couple things. So any changes that were done technically weren't official yet. We can still because coordinators have the autonomy, so myself and Joe Pace can kind of direct our clubs the way we want to. But because there's no official policy, can lead to a disconnect between kind of what I might say or what Joe might say, or we might not be on the same page. So for an example, a couple weeks ago, there was an event called Accepted Students Day, and for me, I did not know it would count for any requirement. Other coordinators thought it did. Just kind of things like that where there was a disconnect between, and we don't really have a set policy in place. So that's why over the summer and the first day budgets come out, we want to have that set policy. So the coordinators, all their clubs are on the same page.
Do you think you guys would be interested in making a policy that every year the e-board does have to come out with a new handbook, so something like this weird limbo year that you guys had doesn't happen again?
I don't think it's necessarily required, just because, like I said, it's really not a limbo year. We just officially go off of the last year's policy. So if we were to come in and be like, hey, we like everything James, Evan, Sade have done, we don't really want to change anything, then there's really no need for us to rewrite everything in the handbook. We would just go off of theirs.
Is there anyone outside the coordinators who would go over your handbook policies that you'd be creating, or would it just be like you guys working together?
Oh, as for like, you mean the review process of it, things like that? Okay, so a lot of our platform ideas would kind of go in there, but also me and Joe, like I said, have been coordinators, so we kind of know where they're coming from, and we do want input from them. What would happen after that's created is it would go to the clubs. The only issue with having every e-board member of every club review it is there are nearly 150 or more clubs, and we can't have 500 people reviewing the handbook and getting everything in. So things like the requirements, like the 222s that they have to meet, those are going to stay in there because they're a basis. A lot of the more specific things will be kind of figured out as we move along and as we start working into it. But it's mainly just so everyone is on the same page. It's not necessarily to dictate every single thing that we need a club to do. It's just so we can have everyone knowing what's going on, which hasn't been the situation this year.
Aside from the handbook, do you have any other plan to help facilitate the communication between the SA and clubs?
I mean, like I said, we do want the grievance policy as well, because I know for me that's been a major issue where a lot of my clubs will come in and say, hey, this person isn't here, this director's not here, and we need this event, we need these items for an event in 2 days or tonight, and we can't get them. So that's another thing we want to do. A lot of the things, what I would be doing as vice president, because traditionally I would deal with clubs, is I would be kind of working with the coordinators because they do have the autonomy, they do work with their clubs more than I would. So I kind of do want to meet with them regularly and just kind of say, hey, what's going on in your council? Are there any concerns? Anything I can do on my part? I mean, I would definitely keep them updated. Emails, I mean, they're off. Our offices are right by each other, so just kind of keeping everybody updated and things like that, I think would help communication between the clubs and SA.
The SA recently introduced a new website. Do you think that that can be utilized in any way to improve communication?
I do think this website, comparatively to last website, as for clubs, has been improved. There's a lot more, everything's updated on it. A lot of times the previous one, it was completely up to clubs to update it. For me, I remember my freshman year, once I got elected to e-boards, we put all the information in the website ourselves. So a lot of times it caused problems because clubs wouldn't update it themselves. So we had e-boards from a year or two ago still on the website. So I do think at least getting regular students who aren't involved yet in touch with the people who can help them get involved, who can kind of guide them towards what clubs to get involved in, I think that way it definitely could. And I mean, all of our contact information is on there. So I do think the website can help facilitate some involvement.
For temporary clubs or people who are looking to start clubs, do you have any plans to teach the student body more about how they can become permanent clubs or more easily facilitate that process?
And this year I've actually, I've recognized 9 or 10 temporary clubs and a couple more are coming. So what I usually do when they come in or they want to start a club or anybody shows an interest of that, I kind of sit down and explain how to go about the temporary status first, and then once they get it, so whether it was kind of UB for Israel, Students for Justice in Palestine, UB Veg, they all came in and I kind of got them through the temporary stuff first, making a constitution, and then after that I sat down individually with them and explained what they needed to do over the next year to become permanent. And I think that's more up to the coordinator to do. I can't really dictate to everybody, so the coordinators have been working with them more, they know their clubs more. I think it's more a coordinator to club kind of interaction that they have to have.
I'll take the last question then. We touched on this with Manahil, but I'm just curious about what you think as well. With the increase of the mandatory student activity fee, you guys are getting $20 more from each student over the course of the year. What are things that you're interested in doing with those funds?
And I mean, a lot of that too will be kind of more figured out as we transition into it. I know Joe and I were in finance committee, so a lot of the money we could actually support clubs more, which was a big thing for us because the year before it was very, very, very strict on who would get increases. There were a lot of cuts given out. So this year we could support clubs more, so that was a benefit. But a lot of the programming we want to do, or any advocacy, or kind of new things, or expanding things such as Buffalo and Tapped, that would kind of go more into summer, into our transition period. And of course, we would include James in on that, and Evan, just to get their perspective on it, and then professional staff as well, just to see where we can kind of benefit the students the most. But specific details will kind of be figured out as we move along.
Does anyone have anything else? Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.